Hi, I'm Becky, and welcome to the first episode of what I hope will be many podcasts that I'm going to upload here on YouTube. I have this expectation that I'm going to get a little bit less awkward if I just kind of launch into this. So that is my plan. I'm just going to launch in. It's episode 1, so I don't really know what this is going to look like, but I think the plan is that I'm going to run through some of my works in progress. I'm going to talk about acquisitions if I have any. I don't today have any. And I'm also going to maybe talk about some special projects that I have on the go. I'm a knitter and I'm a crocheter, and I also quite like to mend things, to darn things, and I'm really excited to get into some sewing this year. I think that having this podcast space is hopefully going to help me to stay accountable for some of these goals that I've set myself in this very relaxed hobby space that I occupy that has no stakes whatsoever. One of those goals is actually that this year I'm not going to acquire any more yarn because I just have a little bit too much. That's such a subjective amount for any single person, but for me, I have too much yarn. So acquisitions might be a little bit light this year, but I'm planning on taking the time to spend a little bit of that money on maybe upgrading some of my knitting equipment, my needles and things like that. So hopefully it won't be totally bare. The way that I would expect to start this off is by talking about any finished objects that I have. But because it's episode 1, I'm not going to run through absolutely every single thing that I've ever made. That would take a really, really long time. And I have not historically been one for writing things down and tracking them. I don't really believe that that should be something we should hold ourselves to, but I have started to be a little bit more on top of things because it's a nice way to round up years, for example. So I thought what I would do is talk about what I'm currently wearing. I'm going to get up and maybe this will work. This is the Framework Raglan. It's by Jessie Maed, and I test knitted this pullover maybe 2 years ago. So I was part of the test knit group for it. The yarn that I used, I actually can't remember. I didn't expect to go into my Ravelry this soon, but here we go. I do remember that the yarn was like a recommended yarn for the test knit. So at the time I was like, this is great. This is what test knitting is about, like these little bonuses. You kind of get a discount on a type of yarn that would fit for the pattern, and then you get to make it, obviously. But I didn't really think about the fact that she's American, I believe, or lives in America, and the yarn that she recommended was an American brand, and I live in the UK. I live currently in London, and the discount and then shipping, I remember, didn't even quite even itself out. So I'm very happy with the yarn, actually. It was such a pleasure to knit with. It was a hand-dyed one, and this is what I mean. I didn't even actually put it on my Ravelry, so all that scrolling about was for naught. But I wear this all the time, so if you know me in real life, A, stop watching, this is so embarrassing, but B, you will have seen me wear this. And if you have come here via my Instagram, you probably have seen me wear this quite a lot. I share pictures of when I'm wearing my knits just to show them out and about and in the wild, that it's not just a process hobby. I love the product as well. So I wear this all the time. It has had a lot of wear, so it's starting to pill a little bit, and I need to give it a bit of a clean up, but I still think it's really versatile and really good. I really like that you can wear it over a lot of different tops and then it changes the whole outfit. I've got quite a lot of these sort of brownie toned outfits, so it seems to go with absolutely everything that I own, which I love, including other hand knits, which is great. So that's my finished object segment of the podcast. As I say, this is one of many that I've made. I am going to go through my whips now I have 5. People might be purist about 2 of them because they're gauge swatches, but I was thinking that your project starts from making the gauge swatch. So I think it counts. I feel comfortable going through it. I'm going to talk about probably, the oldest one first. So the oldest whip that I have is the halibut cowl. This is by, I believe her name is Caitlin Hunter. I'm going to revert to Ravelry again. I was probably one of the people, it is Caitlin Hunter, yes. I was one of the people who was just totally enamored by the halibut sweater. I thought it was amazing. I think that fish yolk is so cool. The reason I didn't cast that on instead was because I saw quite a lot of people online saying that the fit wasn't great, that they ended up having really sort of baggy, unintentionally baggy armpits, and that the length of the yoke was too long, basically, and that really changed as well depending on the size that you were. So if you were maybe a sort of smaller size, then the yoke was a bit more appropriate, whereas if you were a bit bigger, then it didn't fit quite the right way. So that put me off a little bit, but I still thought that the design was really beautiful and really cool, and I thought this cowl would be so good for the never-ending winter that we get here in the UK. I say never-ending, we are kind of coming up to spring now, so it's not that I'm going to get the most use out of this cowl, but also I got put off it a little bit because the yarn that I'm using, I think I chose really badly. It is kind of rustic, so it's like, you can probably see in this, you can feel that kind of scratchiness to it. It's going to be really, I think, unpleasant to have around my neck. First day with a mic, can you tell? It's going to be really unpleasant around my neck, I think, and obviously the dream of having a cowl is that you can put your whole face in it and just snuggle down like a baby rabbit. And I think that's going to be really unpleasant with this yarn. I did have this idea that I might line it, but that feels like a bit strange almost, to line a knitted garment because you didn't make it soft enough. The yarn's really funny. So it came from a stash that my granny had. She had left it in her attic and then it had gotten completely savaged by moths. So her and my very patient auntie sat and wound tiny, tiny little balls of yarn rather than, I think, as many of us would do, calling a bad job and throwing it out. I think it's obviously animal fibre because the moths went for it, but I think it's kind of a woolly sort of thing. So here's an example of one of the balls. And I have like a plastic lunch bag of yarn. But she gave it to me because I don't think she was going to use it. And I obviously have a never-ending hunger for this sort of thing. So I thought, yeah, I can turn it into something and this might be the perfect thing. I thought the colour was really good for the design. I like the sort of reverse teal and then the white to be the fish. I think that looks quite cool. But I'm not super sure about this whip. It's been lingering a little bit because I haven't quite yet made a decision on it. So I need to kind of commit, I think. But not today. The next whip that I have, I cast this on, I think this was like a New Year's treat to myself. I cast this on and it's quite far along. So it's the Lanark sweater by, her name's Rebecca Lau from the Crochet podcast. This is the third Crochet design that I have knit up. So I made the Cargill, obviously, when it launched, and I made the toaster tank last year. And I bought the Lanark sweater pattern, I think, really shortly after it was released. She's been doing some updates to it this year, which has been really helpful. So I have the new updated version of the pattern. I don't think it changed anything too much, but it just made it a little bit clearer in some places to follow. And anyway, I'm really happy with it so far. So here it is. There you go. It's got this collar to it, which is like a folded collar. You can see, knit up and knit back down. And it's made in half fisherman's rib. This is my first ever time doing half fisherman's rib, or any brioche, actually. Somehow managed to not do that in all my years of knitting. I'm really enjoying making this. There's no two ways about it. I really am enjoying making it. I really like the pattern. I think it's going to be a really great finished object. I think I'm going to get a lot of wear out of it. I think the yarn that I've chosen, I'm really pleased with. So the story about this yarn, let me just show it again for a sec. So you can see it's kind of like a navy yarn with these white, they're not really speckles because it's more a feature of the way that it's been spun, I think, rather than deliberate. It's not part of the dye, you know. It came on this cone, and the reason I'm really pleased with this is, I think the yarn choice is really good. I think that it's going to look really beautiful once it's done, and really happy with the colour, really happy with the structure of it. So it's quite hardy. I think this is going to be a really good walks on the moors, blistering wind sort of jumper. So I'm not picturing this as like a perfect date night, comes out once in a blue moon sort of knit. I think this is going to be really, really hardy and really good for walking, as I say. But the other reason that I really am proud of myself for choosing this is because, so I am from Edinburgh, and I obviously go home to visit my family. And one visit I went back and we went to the New Lanark Mills, and that's where I got this yarn from. So I don't know if this is going to show up the wrong way around. I'll fix it in post. So New Lanark is like it's a tiny little place quite close to Edinburgh, and it was set up by a guy who had this vision for how a community would work. So he hired all these people to run the mill, and then he set up a school for their children. All their families moved over, stuff like that. And I think at the time he was hailed as being really progressive because he was like a 19th, 20th century gentleman doing all of this stuff that was seen as really altruistic and really sort of inspiring to that community. But it's a kind of strange place if you go there. It's very much got this artificial town feel, but it's from that era, so it has like a very strange vibe to it. But it's a really nice day out if anybody is traveling around Edinburgh and is looking for that sort of thing. But they still spin yarn and they still sell it in their shop. And I thought the poetry of having yarn from New Lanark that then gets made into the Lanark sweater just felt cool to me. Just felt cool. So I probably wouldn't have just made it on the basis of that poetry, but it is a nice bonus to that project. So I'm looking forward to having that, to be wearing that. Maybe next time that I film, I will have it. The next work in progress that I have, so this is technically still a work in progress because it hasn't been blocked and I haven't woven in the ends, but I have finished the knitting of it. It is the Best Beret by James Watts, and I, to make this, used some stash yarn. I used 3 strands held together. So I think the pattern calls for worsted weight pattern yarn even. So I used 1 strand of DK Ulysses in Line Merinos Cartier. Apologies for pronunciation. And that was a nice sort of teal colour that I had left over from a cardigan that I crocheted at the end of last year. So I had a good amount of that left to use. And then I held it with Jepard Kid Seta, which is kid mohair and silk. And I thought I thought the fabric was really nice. I really loved this. So you can see it's kind of like this royal blue, but then if you look real close, it's also got elements of that more steely, more greeny blue coming through it. I made this so quickly. I cast this on, I think, last weekend, and then it was finished 2 days ago. So I think all in all, it took me like 2 days of knitting. That was pretty solid, I will say. I'm not a particularly fast knitter, which is fine. But it was pretty solid to make, but it was still quite quick. But then I was home alone and I finished knitting this and I decided to try it on. And when I tried it on, I literally burst out laughing. I'm going to put this on camera and maybe you might see why. Here we go. I've gotten over the giggles a little bit. But when I first put this on, I could not stop laughing. I was like, this is so dumb. I think I probably don't really know how to wear a beret. I don't know why I had this vision that I would suddenly become like a very chic Parisian lady. That's maybe a little bit better. Maybe I can just about get away with this. But I showed it to my partner and he said I looked like an acorn, which was very supportive, but I think true. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether I will have the confidence to wear this outside. I think I will potentially block it and finish it off and call it finished. I think I might make this a little bit shorter because I probably just made it a little bit too long. And then I will see whether I can take it to the main streets of London without feeling very dumb. That's maybe okay. We'll see. Confidence updates to follow. But otherwise, I think it's a good job. You know, I'm quite pleased with what I did with that, and I'm very pleased to have got something out in a couple of days. The purist in me doesn't want my first finished object in 2025 to be something that I'm a bit nervous about or that I don't feel great about. So we'll see. We'll see if I find the energy to weave in the ends and to do a block and to wear it. Otherwise, it might end up in somebody's gift pile this year. Okay, so the next couple of things that I want to talk about are, I think, technically works in progress, as I say, because I have done a gauge swatch. So I'm going to show you the gauge swatch. And I'm going to start with this one. So here's the gauge swatch. Every single one of the projects that I am showing you today is blue. Every single one of them, which is a huge coincidence. I posted something on Instagram the other day to say this is, January blues, which just wasn't intentional at all. But I think there's quite a lot of variety in this. So there's obviously there's more teal colour from the halibut, and then there's the navy lanark. There's my royal blue acorn hat. And then this one is, I think, I've been calling it cornflower blue, which I think is accurate. It's kind of lavendery as well. So the plan with this is to make a Campanula tea. And when I first saw a work in progress picture for this tea and thought it was absolutely captivating. It genuinely, I think I shared it with about 3 people and I said, look at this. I am so excited to have it. I also got it in my head that I was going to have a version of it in this colour. So I go to bed at night dreaming of that top specifically. The slight problem is, so this is knit on 2.5mm needles, and I think it is fingering weight that the pattern calls for, but like a more light fingering weight, which this is. So the overall meterage that I need was about 3 skeins worth, according to the pattern, and I only have 2 skeins of this colour. So, and also, I'm a bit under gauge, so this isn't exactly 10 by 10. I think my row gauge is too low. So what that means, maths wise, is it's definitely going to be a game of yarn chicken. It's definitely going to be a bit tight. I have a couple of plans for how I'm going to get around this, and the first is that I'm not going to knit the full sleeve of it. So I think the sleeve comes down to about here, and I'm going to have a bit more of a capped sleeve. And that is because I've got this idea stuck in my head from the work in progress picture that I saw where she hadn't yet done the sleeves. So I wanted a little T rather than the fuller length. So I'm happy with that. And then the other thing is that I'm going to probably knit it a little bit shorter than the pattern calls for. So I tend to knit most of my patterns to, I would say, just below waist, slightly above the hips, rather than the full length that you tend to see. Most of my bottom halves are high-waisted, so that happens to be where it sits quite nicely for everything else that I own. So again, happy with that decision, and we'll just see if that's enough of an accommodation for the lack of yarn. The issue as well is that I can't get any more of this because, or I think it would be quite difficult to get more of this. I haven't actually really looked it up, but it's a hand-dyed skein from a shop in Japan. So I bought this when I was on holiday in Japan last year in a shop called Walnut, which has a couple of branches across Japan. There's, I think, one in Kyoto, one in Tokyo. And I saw this colour and I just thought, this is absolutely incredible. I have to have it. And I thought 2 would probably be enough to make a t-shirt, but I obviously didn't know my vision at that point. So I was making a bit of a gamble. I also bought 2 of the exact same yarn, 2 skeins of the same yarn for my sister for a gift. But I got her a colour that was more in keeping with her colour palette. So it was a nice dark, I was going to say swampy green. I feel like I'm not really selling it. I thought it was really nice, and I thought it would really suit all the other stuff that she owns. So I gave it to her for Christmas. But it just makes me laugh a little bit because every time, so we both knit, but she will make some things, will occasionally make the same pattern, and I always make probably autumnal more colourful things, and hers are deep, dark, greys, blacks, navies. So we look a bit of a picture kind of standing next to each other whenever we go out. Me dressed all entirely in colour and her dark as the night. So updates on that to follow. I really hope I get away with this. I have this slight plan that I might go up the needle size, but then that will change the sort of transparency, obviously, of the fabric. And this is not really a top that I think you would wear over anything. This would be right on the skin. So it's my appetite for some level of transparency and more security that it will be long enough. It's either cropped or see-through. Those are my options. Cropped or see-through. The last one that I'm going to talk about, I also only have a gauge swatch for. This one I'm also really excited for. I've had this plan in my mind for a really long time, and the yarn that I wanted to enact the plan with has only just arrived. So this is my gauge swatch. I feel like this is not going to do justice to it, really. Kind of see how it changes in the light. There's a lot of different things going on in this. So little bits of pink, there's obviously greens, blues, a little bit of purple. It's really fun. It's really beautiful. So this is Melted Baby Suri from Ching Fiber. And the colorway is called Sky Spirit. It's part of a fade release that they did towards the end of last year. So they put out, I think, 6 colors that formed. It was quite fun how they released it. So they released each color in one go, and it wasn't immediately obvious, but then when they put them all together, it was quite clear that it was part of like a nice fade from a yellowy orangey color through to a really deep purple. So I think this is color number 4 in the fade, but I got 4 skeins of this because I want to make my first ever ranunculus. The ranunculus, I think, is one of the most famous patterns out there. I imagine that people have seen hundreds of different versions of ranunculi out in the wild, and I feel like it's a rite of passage to make one of these. But I've seen such variety that people have made. So there's been ones where people have made like cotton versions that have the lace yoke up at the top, but they have the short sleeves and maybe can be a bit more fitted. And those are nice summer tees that people have made. But what I wanted was a big, fluffy, she has a balloon sleeve, longer version that could be layered over 3 different things and potentially have a big spangly necklace over it. I haven't yet decided. I don't tend to make things with a lot of positive ease. I prefer to make things that are a little bit more on the fitted side, and I also don't tend to make things that have that sort of more trapeze shape to them. I actually don't think that there is any waist shaping in this, so maybe not exactly trapeze, but it just goes down. It doesn't have that kind of shaping to it. So I don't tend to make things like that. I feel like it's a little bit of a gamble for me in terms of whether it's going to suit me or not. But again, I've just become so enamored with this vision that I have to enact it. And that's okay. Sometimes you do fail, right? Sometimes you fail is not the right word. Sometimes you do something and you don't quite succeed and you just learn from it. But you don't learn from it if you don't do something that is a little bit of a risk. talking about knitting as though it's a high-risk activity. That brings me to the end of all of my works in progress. I feel like there probably was loads more that I wanted to say about each one of these, and I just haven't really mentioned them or haven't really brought them up. But my plan is to try and upload once every couple of weeks, so there will be more opportunity for me to talk at length about all of these projects as they progress. 5 is quite a lot. I do also have some projects that are hidden away in boxes that I'm not thinking about, and I know I'm not alone in that situation. So I have this vision as well that this year I'm going to pull them out the boxes, and if I don't finish them, I'm going to take them back and use the yarn for something else. And I think not having, being a bit strict with myself about not bringing new yarn in is going to help with that as well, just because I have loads and loads, and when you work with constraints, you get to be a bit more creative sometimes. So this is the constraint that I have placed on myself, is to massively reduce the amount of yarn that I'm going to be buying this year, with some notable exceptions. So I am planning on buying yarn for gifts. I do have some gift knitting planned, so I think I'm going to try and get through that list of gifts first and then see where I end up. But apart from gift knitting, and apart from any gifts that I do receive as well, there will be no more yarn entering this house. Put my foot down. It has just gotten a little bit ridiculous. I think at the point where I don't know exactly how much I have, that's where I start to get a little bit worried. I think it's okay to shame my own stash. I don't think it's okay to shame anybody else's stash, but I think it's okay for me to look at my own and be like, okay, you gotta start doing some of this stuff and start bringing some of these things out into the world. So that's the plan. The last segment that I wanted to do on this podcast, if you will permit me, is I have a couple of additional projects that are not straightforward, that have been on my mind for a really long time. And as a sort of challenge to myself, my plan was that I would try to get through one of those projects every single month. So my January sticky project that I have, that my goal is to finish by the end of this month, is I knit a pair of gloves for my partner a couple of years ago. I'm just going to grab them from behind the camera. And so I knit them because he has really bad circulation, and it felt like a thoughtful gift to make him something that would keep him warm, and obviously I kind of wanted to make sure his circulation was a bit better. So I made these gloves, and even though I thought it was quite thoughtful at the time, I think that it rapidly became a bit of an issue, because it took me ages to finish them, and he probably could have just bought himself some gloves. So maybe there was a net bad there for him. And then I was really unhappy with them when I finished them. I was like, there's some stuff going wrong here. So I kind of made that burden of, I'm not happy with the thing that I've made you. So I don't think that was particularly great. And then the other issue that has happened now is that, so I made them last year, and over the summer we put them in a basket in our house, and unfortunately we have also been plagued by moths. So loads of things that were in that basket ended up with moth holes in them. A couple of things that I'd made, projects that I'd done, some of which were you know, not so much of a loss, and I wasn't so worried about them or wasn't so upset about them. But a couple of which I was really upset about, including these gloves. So I did a bit of a mend on them, and I'm going to show you. These are the gloves. You can see where I've done some of the mending, but this is probably the worst area of damage, and then this is the mend that I did. It's nominally supposed to be an invisible mend. It looks pretty visible to me. So I need to tidy this up a bit more. It's not bad for a first go. I wish it was something of mine that I was doing this on, because I quite like the look of something being repaired, and I actually quite like doing the visible mending. I like the idea that that tells a story of the garment that you have, and it's an opportunity to think about how you can have these pops of disruption in something that should be really finished, neat, predictable. So that's definitely a kind of evolving journey for me, I think, to figure out what looks good there and what doesn't. So I decided to do this as an invisible one because it was for somebody else, and you know, it's just because it was a gift, I thought it'd be a bit nicer. But I'm really not very impressed with the state of the mend that I did in some areas of this. Some look a bit better. So some smaller areas look a bit better. So you can maybe see this kind of area here. There's a bit of a ridge at the base of the thumb that I also did the same technique to mend, and I think it looks quite good. It was just this big area of mending that looks badly knitted rather than badly mended, I think. So I'm going to tidy it up, and I think that's going to be my project for today, actually. I'm going to finish it off, I'm going to tidy it up, I'm going to give it back to Ben and say, keep your little fingers warm. But again, I've kind of made that a burden because I was like, oh no, I promise I'll fix it. And it's been a long time, and winter is nearly over. So that was the last sort of segment that I wanted to do. I think in future podcasts, I'll talk about some other styles of projects a little bit like that. But some of the things that I have on my list to talk about are other mends that I've neglected for a while, some for myself, some for other people, and also some crafting adjacent projects. So I have some like needle felting that I want to do. I have some little sewing things that I want to do. I have a bit of furniture that I've been waiting for a really long time that I should just get on with. And then the other thing that I need to finish off as well, or the other thing that I was thinking about doing, is I have some knitted projects that I made maybe a while ago that I really haven't gotten anywhere out of at all. So I thought I might also spend a bit of time going through the graveyard and say, what do I want to do with each one of these? Because it makes no sense to have an investment of yarn kind of sitting there unloved, especially if it's not something I'm necessarily particularly proud of. So I think it's totally fine to make things that you're really, really proud of that you hardly ever wear and not feel guilty about that, because we shouldn't feel guilty about anything that we've made, obviously. But I think just for me, there's stuff where I'm like, I could really use that yarn for something else that I'm really excited about. And the process of doing that is quite fun. So I thought I might talk about some of those things as well. I'm coming up on probably 45 minutes for this video. That was roughly what I thought would make sense for a podcast. I prefer to sit down and watch these things and just get soaked up by somebody else's projects. So I hope you feel the same, and I hope that you've enjoyed hearing about what I'm knitting. If you have any thoughts about anything that I've talked about in the video, I would love to hear them. I really want to connect with people. That's part of the fun of doing this. Tell me if you think I suit the beret. That's the real issue. Tell me if you think I can wear the beret outside. Tell me if you think that I am kidding myself with the Campanula tee. Tell me if you are excited about hearing about graveyard things. Tell me if you are interested in a stash tour. I quite like those sorts of videos as well. So I think maybe doing a video where I walk through everything that I have and talk about some of the things that I have plans for, what those plans are, and then sharing some other things that are maybe a little bit more difficult that I've struggled to think of things for. That I think would also be really fun. I would really enjoy doing that. So let me know if you would enjoy doing it. Otherwise, thank you so much for making it to this point. It's a huge investment of your time. I hope you've been knitting something or making something as you go. I'm just stopping my cat from attacking my furniture. Maybe she'll make more of an appearance in future videos. But if there's nothing else, and there is nothing else, because I have nothing else, I'll say goodbye. Thank you for joining, and hopefully see you next time.